Yo guys, what is going on? Welcome back to the VenoScorp YouTube channel. I hope you're all doing well. Today we've got a brilliant video lined up for you. We're going to be testing out a previous gen RTX 4070 Ti, my personal RTX 4070 Ti, against the latest RTX 5070 Ti. And we're going to give you guys a breakdown on which one is the best value for money. But without further ado guys, hit that subscribe button and let's get straight into it. Right, so before we start putting these two GPUs to the test, let's go through the PC specs and see what we're working with. Now, starting off with our CPU, we've got the Ryzen 9 7900X 3D. Then just to the right of that, we've got 32 gigabytes of Corsair RAM at DDR5 running at 6000 megahertz. Then we've got 2 terabytes of NVMe M.2 storage from XPG. And then obviously looking at the graphics card here, we've started off with the RTX 5070 Ti from Gigabyte, with all of those components being run on the Asus Prime B650 Plus Wi-Fi. Then halfway through the video, we're going to be introducing my very own RTX 4070 Ti from PNY. But by having a quick look at MSI Afterburner, we're going to be running these GPUs on their stock settings. So that means no overclocking, and that means a completely fair competition between the two GPUs. Along with that, all the components in the PC are going to be run on stock settings as well, keeping the system stable and running throughout the entire process. And then finally, all the drivers running the hardware in the PC are running the latest softwares, latest drivers, keeping faults within softwares on drivers to a minimum. So today we're going to be benchmarking these GPUs at 1080p because we're testing this GPU on a monitor that most people will most likely have, which is a standard 144Hz 24-inch monitor. We're going to be using 3 softwares today to benchmark the GPUs, starting off with MSI Combustor. As you can see, these are the settings that we've chosen for it today. So now with the stress test running, we can see the GPU keeps a stable temperature of around 52 to 55 degrees with an average FPS of about 153 FPS. So far, this RTX 5070 Ti is doing a really good job going through this benchmark. And now with the final result, let's have a look what we got. So at 1080p, this RTX 5070 Ti got a score of 9,305 points, averaging 155 frames per second. So next up, we're going to be testing this RTX 5070 Ti in Firmark. As you can see, these are the benchmark settings that we're going to be using for this test. And let's see how it gets on. So straight off the bat, it's averaging the mid 290 FPS and sitting at a comfortable 65 to 66 degrees Celsius. At 1080p, we're expecting this to absolutely fly through it, and no doubt something like an RTX 5070 Ti for 1080p gaming is not going to disappoint you whatsoever. I'll see you guys in a sec for the final score. So in the end, the RTX 5070 Ti scored 17,483 points, averaging 291 FPS with a maximum clock of 2,812 megahertz. Now before we move on to the next benchmarking test, comment down below what you guys think of the RTX 5070 Ti. And finally, let's move on to the final benchmarking app, which we decided to change from CapFrame X to Performance Test. In this benchmarking application, we're going to be running their 3D Mark software. And without further ado, let's get going. So now we're going through all the 3D Mark tests. On the first test, which is an 8x multi-sample testing, the RTX 5070 Ti is doing a really good job, surpassing well over 300 frames per second. And now we're moving on to the second test, keeping frame rate and image on the screen nice and smooth. Now moving on to DirectX 11 testing, we can see this RTX 5070 Ti is just flying through this test. Next up is DirectX 12 testing, performing with frame rates well over 300 FPS. Temperatures are staying nice and consistent, staying around the mid 50s to mid 60 degrees. And as you can see, with all the tests that this graphics card is going through, it handles them like a champ. So now with the final scores in, let's see what it got. So this RTX 5070 Ti from Gigabyte scored an amazing score of 29,749. But now with the RTX 5070 Ti fully tested, let's turn this PC off and then switch it up with my personal RTX 4070 Ti. And before we quickly do that, comment down below what your PC specs are and what you think the difference between the 4070 Ti and the 5070 Ti are going to be. Here is another personal look at my RTX 4070 Ti. So I've owned this RTX 4070 Ti for quite a while now. I first got it back in 2023 when these things first came out, and this thing has not skipped a beat. It has worked flawlessly for me and should work flawlessly in this PC today. Installing the 4070 Ti is as easy as removing the screws holding the side panel on, removing the screws holding the current 5070 Ti in, taking the 5070 out out, and then simply put in the replacement 4070 Ti in. And now with the 4070 Ti in the PC, here is what it looks like. This is one of the bigger models of the 4070 Ti. It's triple slotted, and I think it looks pretty cool. But no more messing about. Let's go to benchmarking. Starting again with MSI Combustor, all the settings have been kept the same, no changes have been made, because as I said earlier, we want to make sure we keep this test as fair as possible. So making a start now, the GPU is currently sitting at 134 frames per second. The benchmark's looking pretty smooth, so it's doing a pretty good job so far. With the GPU staying at a stable temperature of around 65-66 degrees like the 5070 Ti. So now looking at the RTX 4070 Ti's performance, we got a score of 7,905 points. Now comparing that to the RTX 5070 Ti, which received 9,300 points, shows that from one generation to another, there can actually be quite a big jump. Along with that, the RTX 5070 Ti performed at an average of 155 FPS, while this 4070 Ti performed at an average of 131 FPS. So now with MSI Combustor out of the way, let's move on to the next benchmark. With the next benchmarking software being Thermark, let's see how this RTX 4070 Ti performs. As per usual, the settings have been kept the same, keeping it a fair test, and let's see how it runs. So the RTX 4070 Ti is currently averaging around 270 to 290 frames per second. Along with that, it's currently sitting at a nice and comfortable 70 degrees Celsius, and with zero stutters, this graphics card is going through this test nice and smoothly. So let's see how the RTX 4070 Ti did in Thermark. So with a score of 16,623 points, let's compare that to the RTX 5070 Ti. So hitting a maximum clock of 2,670 megahertz, along with having an average temperature of around 70 degrees, this 4070 Ti fell just slightly short of the 5070 Ti, with the 5070 Ti achieving 17,483 points, comparing that to the RTX 4070 Ti, which achieved 16,623. But in real world benchmarking, this isn't too much of a difference. It shows that the 5070 Ti is of course slightly faster than its last gen predecessor. So now with that being said, let's go on to the final benchmark and see how this 4070 Ti performs. So again, like the 5070 Ti, is going to be going through multiple tests ranging from DirectX 9 up to DirectX 12 and GPU compute. So let's see how it does. As we can see, it's flying through the test. Same settings as the 5070 Ti, going with 8x multi-sample and all of it running on 1080p like on this monitor. So with a high frame rate of around 395 frames per second, let's move on to the next test. Like the 5070 Ti, the 4070 Ti is going through this process very smoothly. And then moving on to the next test, which is DirectX 11, we're getting a nice high frame rate, nice and smooth, making this graphics card more than capable of running very intensive games. Now running DirectX 12, let's see how it does. And then finally, we're going to finish it off with a direct compute test. Before this test finishes, comment down below which graphics card you would buy. And now with this benchmark finish, let's see how the 4070 Ti did. So as we can see here, the 4070 Ti managed to score a brilliant score of 32,816. This actually beat the 5070 Ti by 3,000 points. But while the 4070 Ti beat the 5070 Ti, when it comes to proper gaming, you're not actually going to see too much of a difference. So now putting all those scores together, we can now see that both the RTX 4070 Ti and the 5070 Ti are actually very similar in terms of their performance. So now comes the question, what would I recommend that you get for your PC? With the 5070 Ti slipping just ahead in two of the benchmarks, and with slightly more VRAM being 16 versus the 4070 Ti's 12, the 5070 Ti for overall performance is the one to go with. Now you can get this graphics card in a very similar build to this on the VenoScorp website. So just like we've been doing today, you can do this exact same benchmark by yourself. But there's no doubt that for an almost 3-year-old card, the 4070 Ti has held up brilliantly. Let's not forget, we ran these graphics cards on their stock settings. There was no overclocking involved, there was no tuning involved. So with a graphics card like the 4070 Ti along with the 5070 Ti, you could actually push way more performance than what we've just shown today. But if from today's video you're actually interested in getting a VenoScorp PC, then by all means the link to the website is going to be down in the description, along with pre-conditioned refurbished PC parts to finish off even your personal build. Anyways, my name's Charlie, thank you guys for making it to the end. Comment down below what you guys want to see next, and I'll see you guys in a bit. Peace!